Good evening. Hey, Coach Connor. Good to see you, buddy. I guess we're good to go. Let's see. Do we need the unpaid Gatorade commercial in the background? Maybe not. Okay, so I think you threw in a challenge there, buddy. Let me mute the laptop so we don't get the feedback. And let's go ahead and accept. Get a game underway. How are you? Did I miss you last week or the week before? Oh. Whatever, I gotta move. Hey, McKnights. Okay, now, I did make a move there, okay. A little bit of sadness that I can share with you guys. See the little cat pictured? It was with me 15 years. And passed away, so that's a bit of sadness in my life. Now I like playing c3 because now I got this nice pawn wall, and that kind of puts the bite on his bishop and his knight. Now we could play aggressively there with e5. Computer might say that's better, but I'm happy just to keep building. I mean, he gave away a pretty valuable center pawn. He does have a little bit of development, but I think he's got an uphill battle here. And for my part, I don't have to do anything crazy. I already have a good solid extra pawn. Put the rook opposite x-ray and his queen, try to curtail any breaks on his part. And now I'm thinking, get busy on the queen side. b4, a4, start attacking on that wing. Oh, now that's going to be expensive. I put the rook there precisely to stop that type of pawn advance. Yeah, my sweetie was a real companion during some lonely times during the last couple of years here with the pandemic and everything. And yeah, at night, you know, she'd come, wake me up. Oh, sorry about that, Coach Connor. Yeah, that was maybe d6, maybe one square would have been more prudent. Okay, so as they say in the movies, this can go from bad to worser. Worser is not correct English, Mr. Henley. Thank you. Ah, why not? Okay, I'm going to turn the sound up because I'm not hearing anything when I make a move on ICC. Okay, McKnights, you feel up to a game, buddy? Or Coach Connor, you want a rematch? Because you didn't, that was not your best game, dude. Now that you're warmed up.
Incoming challenge.
Okay, Coach, I'm going to play McKnights because he didn't get in a game yet.
Started.
What does he play against the straight Queen's Gambit declined or accepted or whatever? Slav. Great opening. Great opening. Used to play it with black myself. That, though, I think is a touch premature, supposedly, allegedly.
Server announcement.
But, of course, these things are never as clear as they're supposed to be. Now, of course, you could trade queens and give them double pawns. I saw Karpov win that ending against Kasparov in a rapid game in New York Times. They got to a rook and knight versus rook and knight ending, and those double B pawns, he just suffered like a dog.
Check.
Now here I got the double pawns, but I do have an extra. Oh, I've got an extra D pawn. Yeah, that guy's going to come there. Then he's going to try to make trouble. I double flinched when I played that move. Someone shot me a message, but I missed it. Okay, on the other side of town over here, I'm gonna... Oop, that didn't work. Oh, okay. Well, sorta. Except now I'm on the wrong screen there. Okay. I'm trying to get that guy over here. That way I could keep a closer eye in case my buddy Sandro has anything to say to me. Okay, so what's going on? He's developing, we're developing. I want to get this guy out here. And now he's ready to play b5. Oh, this is stupid what I'm making. This is not too bright. This is not such easy work with this extra pawn here. Yeah, he was threatening knight takes d4 check, right? Right. But this is still annoying. I just do not feel like I'm making progress here. I am making this more and more difficult. Well, I just totally pissed this all away. If we collect a second pawn, we're back in action. So what do we have? We have rook and two guys for two guys. Now we're really in action. Well, say we got lucky here would be a big understatement. Okay, Nezhmednov. That Knights, that was your big opportunity there, buddy. You had serious chances there. Okay, what are we playing here? Playing Nezhmednov. Great opening, c3 Sicilian. By the way, also known as Sveshnikov's Sicilian, and Sveshnikov passed away recently, I think. I saw something to that effect. Great theoretician. Maybe I should have played d4. Yeah, I think d4 might have been a better way to go. Yeah, this is smart what he's doing. He's trying to undermine me before I get all settled in. And he's doing a great job. Oh, there, he should have played knight bd2. Now I'm okay. Now I am okay. Knight bd2 would have put pressure on my complex, would have punished me for the premature advance. Now, everything I think is pretty much okay. I think. My bishop eyeballs his a4 pawn. I'm contesting the b file. And as Carlson pointed out, the bishop on f8 in this scenario is actually better sometimes than being on g7. Because when you play e6, it can go to e7, help support the h4 pawn if you've made that advance. Okay, now I'm surprised there that he's trading. Well, here I think I can just trade and pop a pony. I am a little bit lined up on the a file, but I need a few moves to get my bits out. But then so does he. Okay, so do we want to play h4 here? Or just let him mechanically advance? Yeah, why not? He still has to do a little work to get the advance in. I need to go in there and touch that knight on b1. Ah, I missed the moment. But maybe lightning can strike from the other side. Or should I go knight b3 check? I don't think I did this the best. But maybe it's okay. I went there because if his bishop comes out to e2, oh darn it. Now I could sack and get light square control. Otherwise, if I just go back, not easy to break in. My pieces are tripping over each other. Otherwise, he's going to get his bishop out. I wanted to go rook up and steal his pawn. Let's go back. Check. Now if I go rook up, he goes bishop e2, I go there. He goes there. I'm trapped. Ah, what the heck. Sometimes you got to get your hands dirty. I may regret this, but I have a feeling I should have been getting my bishop to c2 and pushing my a-pawn. Okay, now I want to play bishop b3 and run that pawn up to a4 so that it is defended. But now he's threatening to go bishop there. Okay, so I managed to hold on to that guy for better or for worse.
Check.
I was thinking he went rook to e1. Confuse me. Oh.
Check. One coming worth the challenge.
Good game, dude.
Server announcement.
Oh, Coach Connor. Yes, my cat, Sweetie. Been with me 15 years. Passed away. That's who passed away. The little cat in the picture on the chessboard. I also have a great position coming out of the opening. Middle game to end game. No, but there you outplayed me and trapped my rooks. I didn't find a good plan, and you got your pieces well placed, McKnights. Good game. So I think what we'll do today, while I still have breath and still have energy, is go ahead and take a look. I mentioned one of my favorite things here is you go to my profile.
Coming challenge.
Okay, Coach, one more game and then we're going to do our presentation bit.
Started.
Yeah, so this is a very sad week. But good news is that my kids at school, 19 kids in the after-school class today. So those are the things that make life fun, and they were all well behaved and all wanted to play with each other. Uh-oh, some B3 trouble. This smells like some Kramnik type stuff. Or Wesley So might be playing something like this. Now, of course, e5 definitely weakens the d5 square, so I'm taking on the obligation that I'm going to have to cover the d5 square with pieces, like the knight, the light-squared bishop, the other knight. On the other hand, though, it kind of restrains the d4 possibilities by white. Now the question is, what will he do with his king's knight? I'm not sure what the point of that is. He's forcing me to play a move that I kind of want to play. Now, if this keeps going in this direction, I could eventually think about playing bishop to e6 and play for d5. Yeah, why not? I might like to have one or two more consolidating moves in, like pawn to b6 or rook c8. Because now, for example, if I play d5, he takes, I take with the knight. If he takes, I can take with the bishop. Now, on the other hand, now where's he going on this side? I'm going to boot him again. Color me confused. And pretty clear I'm going to castle kingside. Not real clear what his game plan is. Now, I guess if I was already castled when he went knight b5. Okay, so now if I go d4, he'll take and get a nice square on c4. He'll be all over my e5 pawn. So let's switch gears. Let's go this way. Okay, now I guess he could go c4 and then rotate around. But I don't have to play b4. Knight to c2, and then the knight will resurface on e3. Oh, yeah. Although now, anytime I play f5, my knight on c6 might be quite a bit looser. See, I was expecting him to do that earlier. Now, threatened pawn takes pawn. Okay, but now he gives me a pretty big center, and knight c2 to e3 is not as fearsome because he's got a lot less control. So positionally, this is not looking super pleasant. And now I may think about attacking on the queen side, like knight to b4. Or just stick to the program, one program, and play queen d7 and f5 and try to party on over there. So interesting, in these situations you can play queen d7, f5, pawn takes, you got a monster center. And sometimes they go knight h4 and try to go queen h5, can be annoying, but you might just run them over like a Mack truck in the center. Another idea is to play queen d7, g5, and then play f5. Now that's going to be less likely now that this knight is coming. Now he's got some possibilities to play a4 over here. We could just play d5 here, go full Monty and try and take the center. Now he'll probably play pawn takes, knight takes, and then he'll put a rook on the e-file. What to do? Let's go for the big center. Play f5. Okay, but now we can get in f4. Now what we really want, if we're allowed, is to play g5. He's fighting the clock here as well as a huge space disadvantage. Now we got nice play on the f-file. We got moves like g5. His bishop's far away from driving away my rook. So I can play g5, knight g6, really put the clamp down on the f4 square. Okay, I was going to do the presentation. Let's see, 6:30. Foxy, let me knock out the presentation, okay? And then I'm going to, and then I'll play you first, okay? So let's see, view, my profile, games. Let me, hold on. Okay, hold on. Backslash open. WIM Beaky says, sorry, phone. Oh, no worries. Yeah, that's why I figured something came up. Okay, so we go to my profile. We go to most recent games, and then we go to games library. It says you can hold 400. I'm not at 400 yet. And last week we covered 3 games by Botvinnik. Critical games, World Championship games, where he used the bishop pair. And so this week we're going to look at one of his, well, I guess probably his main rival, Vasily Smyslov. And Smyslov, of course, you know, played 3 matches for the World Championship with Botvinnik. I think he maybe lost 1, drew 1, and won 1. And that's how he became world champion for a brief period. And then, of course, Botvinnik eventually regained the title. But Smyslov was excellent with the bishop pair. I just want to check, make sure everything looks good there. Okay. So, ironically enough, 2 of the games we're going to look at were against Reshevsky, who was considered the best non-Soviet player, or non-Russian player, at that time. So the first game was from like the, I think the World Championship tournament. Smyslov's playing white, Reshevsky's black. You can see Reshevsky plays very solid, kind of a Steinitz, Kozio, Rulopez. Bishop back. Now, of course, in this situation, bishop back threatens the immediate knight to g5. Black has to do something. That explains h6. Knight d2, knight to c4. And now what's interesting is what happens here. So Reshevsky's playing what we call kind of a strong point defense here, okay? Where he's really got a lot of defenders on the c5 point. So Smyslov sends 1 knight in. He's now got the possibility of capturing the dark squared bishop. Now it's true, it would represent a bit of loss of time because he's moved this knight 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 would be the capture for a piece that moved twice. But interestingly enough, watch what happens. Rook e8, pawn takes, bishop takes, and then he's able to capture the dark squared bishop for the knight that's only moved 1, 2, whereas his bishop's actually moved 1, 2, 3. And he's managed to keep his much more powerful knight, the knight that is semi-outposted on d5. Of queen out. Queen out creates veiled threats against the f7 pawn. See, we've got the bishop and the queen intersecting on f7. Well, of course, bishop e6 to neutralize the diagonal, but rook to the d file, all very smooth. And you can see this knight on d5 covers squares that the queen would like to go to. So basically, the only free square out is h4, but of course the c7 pawn hangs. So, bishop takes. Rook takes. Now the queen has to be careful where it goes because, again, veiled threats on f7. Queen e7. So white has the true two-bishop pair advantage. Queen f5. Very nice move. That threatens a nasty rook d7 with pins, and queen takes g6. Knight back, guarding the entry square. Bishop to e3. What really impressed me about this game and the next one that we will see is, you know, here he's playing a guy that was like probably top 7 in the world or something, and Smyslov just made it look so easy. Knight out. Rook's doubled on the open file. Well, Reshevsky gets there in time to keep the rook out of d7. And a little quiet move. Remember, Steinitz taught us, use our pawns, keep those knights out of those invasion points. Rook to d6. And now, interesting, he changes the pawn formation, because black was going to play rook to d8. So he makes a change here in the pawn formation, but this does not reduce his advantage at all, because first, he threatens bishop takes h6. When he guards that, then he inserts the bishop on the new weakness created on b6. That also keeps the rook off of d8, which means the queen has to remain tied to defending this backward pawn on a half-open file. Well, bishop back. And now, the way Smyslov in this game converts one advantage to another, to another, to another, I'm telling you, when I was a kid, this was the kind of game that I would study 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times and just savor and appreciate. You know, like a very good movie where you watch it over and over and you see different nuances that you didn't see before. So first off, right here, while these pieces are in the corner, he actually gives up one of his 2 bishops. Now, of course, black is forced to take with the pawn, because queen takes, you trade queens, you crash in on d6, you win 1 pawn, you win a 2nd pawn on e6, game over. Therefore, he has to take with the pawn. But that, in combination with the next move. Someone described this type of position that the black queen is the glue that is holding the black position together. And so Smyslov plays the slightly counterintuitive queen to h4, offering to trade queens, take on double pawns himself, but with the realization that after trade, the pawn on d6 will just simply fall, and the white rook will penetrate. So Reshevsky avoids the trade for the moment, but look, Smyslov is so certain of his in-game advantage, he fires the queen in. He doesn't try to play bishop back or g4, g5 and attack the king. He goes for the endgame. Take, take, and now we can see the pawn on d6 is on the menu. Well, of course, the knight hops out, but the rook attacks the bishop just comes back. Knight up, and now Reshevsky, to his credit, gets some counterplay by activating his knight. But Smyslov does not let him off the hook. Rook takes. Now rook over. Again, if he plays knight takes pawn, simply rook takes on e6. The e5 pawn will fall next. But Reshevsky is more clever. And now the bishop comes back, taps the knight. And the knight goes the other direction. You can see the knight is eyeing these queenside pawns, and you can't play rook back because your bishop is under attack. But no worries, rook takes, knight takes, and rook takes. So Reshevsky has traded in the queenside pawns for these center pawns, and now has a passed e-pawn, and a 2-pawn surplus for the moment. Knight to c4, rook up, knight takes, rook takes, and you can see Smyslov is converted to a rook endgame. Well, rook takes, and then rook down. Now here, Again, I think Smyslov just played this so smoothly. He's like, look, you can have the a-pawn. And while you're taking the a-pawn, I'm going to step up with my king, make a little progress, and box you in. Now see, the g6 square is very weak. Keep your eye on that, how that will affect the game. Now Smyslov knows that the a-pawn by itself, with his rook behind the a-pawn, is not too dangerous as long as he is careful with his king. We'll see what we mean. First he advances. Now he starts to bring his king up. Now one clever trick here in these endgames is to leave your pawn on the second rank. That way if they push their rook and push and then go behind, when you play rook takes pawn, your base pawn will be defended. He goes pawn up. He goes rook down. Now when he goes rook down, he wants to push and then go rook check. So of course Smyslov is going to hide his king. See how the king is hidden? Now, if he wants to progress, he's got to push the pawn. While he pushes that one, now he pushes this one. Notice he doesn't play king f5 because then that would allow rook over. Rook takes pawn check. And going in is a bit problematical because rook f6 check. It might still win, but it's very messy. Instead, Smyslov does it very, very nice and tidy. He goes pawn up. Now, he's got the possibility, as we'll see. When he goes king back, now he plays king up. And remember we talked about the weakness of the g6 square. Because when Reshevsky goes to play rook over, he's able to take the pawn, give up that pawn, and then slot the king in on g6. And notice with the pawn on e5, black does not have the nasty rook f6 checkmate. And, in fact, black is now threatened with rook a8 check. Well, he flees with the king. But what's the choice? If he goes rook back to f8 to guard the back row, well then of course rook to a7, and then the g7 pawn falls. Once the g7 pawn falls, the h7 pawn falls. So he goes, Reshevsky flees with his king. But then rook check, check. He simply takes that, gives up the e-pawn, takes a second pawn, two connected passed pawns, easy peasy, and Reshevsky resigns. Okay? So, super instructive game where he got the bishop pair, right out of the opening. Like right here. After bishop takes e5, knight takes, pawn takes. He already had the first bishop, and then later black felt compelled to eliminate the strong knight. He got the second bishop, and he just made it look super smooth. Very powerful technique by Smyslov. Now, as I said, ironically enough, the next game we're going to see is also Smyslov against Reshevsky. In Twitch, chat, type /mod McKnights. Oh, you know what? Duh. Okay. 1 second for a little technical thingy here. Okay, so now, second game against Reshevsky is not because I didn't like Reshevsky. I only met him once. I'm not particularly fond of him. Read some very unpleasant stories about him. But as a player, he was considered a great player and, America's hope for the World Championship until Bobby Fischer came along, of course. And I think later in life he was, probably a bit bitter that his moment passed him by. I believe he honestly believed he was going to be world champion at some point. But all that aside, let's look at the chess. Stylistically, he just seemed to have a style that Smyslov feasted on. Like here again, if I'm going to give up the bishop, I want to give him double pawns. But what happens here is now queen to b3, and he gives up the bishop. Interestingly enough, recently on the Throne of Contemplation, I was thumbing through a reappraisal of Aaron Nimzovich by Raymond King. And of course, we know that Nimzovich really showed great examples. John or Nimzovich, for example, classic game, where he gave up the bishop and gave white double pawns. But Keen also pointed out a handful of examples where Nimzovich, in this type of scenario, gave up the bishops, did not inflict double pawns, and suffered badly. And so anyway, like if you were going to give up that bishop for the knight earlier, you could have given him double pawns. Now, white doesn't even get double pawns, and white's not particularly behind in development. And white also has fluid central pawns so that he can, you know, try to restrict the knights. And then you play with the little center. Like, now along here, he plays d4. He gives up some control over the e4 square, but he is gaining space. He goes knight over, rook over, bishop in, pawn takes, and queen to e3. This queen to e3 reminds me of a game that I had where I was black against Yasser Seirawan in a New York Open one year. Very similar type thing. I had a position that on the surface looked quite okay. I'd played an h6 recommendation that Roman had mentioned against the Queen's Indian. And but Yasser played queen e3 and just played superb. And that was his best win ever against me. He just really played beautifully with the two bishops, and at one moment converted to opposite colored bishop and checkmated my king by running it around. But also I remember this queen e3 was that quiet, insidious move. Another idea in these positions sometimes is to play bishop h3 and then knight d2 and kick that bishop out and then expand. Let's see what happens here. He goes e5. Oh, he does it. He goes bishop h3. This is a little bit of evasion. And now knight to h4 because the f5 square beckons. And so notice he's managed to move his knight, free his f-pawn, without allowing the exchange of light squared bishops. f3, there you go. Knight back, or bishop back, rook up. Now again, backward d6 pawn, half open file, doubles down. That keeps the queen and the rook busy. Keeps black from breaking with d5, getting frisky. Queen over. Now he chops the bishop, and now the bishop comes back. And then queen over, and a little bit of tick and tack back and forth. And you can see the white bishops don't look so impressive at this point. This one's biting on the e5 pawn. This one's biting on its own pawns. But watch how smoothly Smyslov plays this. Well, actually, tell you the truth, Hrushevsky does it to himself at one moment here. He just cracks under pressure. White's not threatening to play f4 yet because the e4 pawn is hanging for sure. You can just take. So a bit of tick-tocking back and forth, and Hrushevsky has not made Smyslov actually show a winning breakthrough plan yet. Okay, so notice how Smyslov lines up the bishops on the other side. Now he may potentially consider rook over, pawn up, and pawn up. Okay? But still, it's not devastating. And here, it's like Hrushevsky just loses it. And he does white's job for him, because when you got the bishop here, you want to open the chessboard. And what does Hrushevsky do? He plays this pawn break that opens the chessboard for the bishops. So this was poor judgment or time pressure, I'm not sure. Anyway, Smyslov more than happy to blast open the king side. And now he goes knight in. Smyslov gives up one bishop, checks, and wins a pawn for the moment. But the f5 pawn is obviously weak, bishop still hidden, but the f4 pawn is also weak. And here's Hrushevsky's idea, is he wanted to blast out and get some activity. Well, pawn takes, and Smyslov says, okay, I'm going to give up the f-pawn, but I now have a potential monster past d-pawn. Rook up, check. and rook up. Queen takes. And here I think is where Reshevsky really lost it. He should trade queens and recoup the pawn on d5. As we will see, that's the dangerous one. But instead, for some reason, he trades queens and then he goes rook to the 7th for counterplay. He should have knocked that d5 pawn out of the park. But I think he was afraid of trades. But then if you trade and trade, you don't have time to play f6 right away. So, strange decision, rook e2, probably the losing move. Watch what happens. Smyslov gives up the a2 pawn. And then he pops the rook in. Well, it's always about eliminating the blockader, whether you trade or sacrifice. Knight back. But now he plants it in his face. Rook e6, and suddenly that worthless f5 pawn has some value. And then pawn up. Now with this guy protected, this rook is free. The d1 rook is free. So now he starts threatening check, check, chop. Well, rook takes. And maybe this is what Smyslov missed. He probably was expecting pawn takes, f-pawn takes, and then knight e6, d6 blockading, or king e7 even. Instead, he gets hit with pawn takes, which is a critical tempo on the knight. Now suddenly the bishop comes to life. And after the knight moves, check, and we can see the passed pawn has been allowed some freedom. And of course, this costs the knight. The king steps up. And now again, you might expect a move like, say, rook to e3, guarding this b3 pawn. You really don't want to let black have two connected passed pawns. But Smyslov, very alertly, boom! Bishop to g6. And rook takes b3, bam! Checkmate, right there on f6. Boom! So, an interesting game, not as smooth as the first one. And I think Reshevsky also kind of did it to himself in two places where he played f5, opening the board in the first place, and later he should have eliminated that d5 pawn. That thing came back to bite him big time. Now, the last game that I want to show from Reshevsky was played against Philippe. This was later in his career. Philippe was a Czech grandmaster, and let's see what happened. Okay, so a Benoni. And Philippe plays a variation that's, fairly popular among black players. In fact, Roman Djindjinashvili, actually, one of his videos recommended playing something like this. When you're in a cramped position, you want to trade a couple of pieces. The bishop on c8 tends to be one of black's problem childs in many openings. And also, by giving it up for the knight in particular, you help restrain white's efforts to play e5. Well, Reshevsky says that's all fine and well, but give me the bishops. And now, interesting what he does here. Almost mechanically, since the time of Nimzovich, when black plays a6 in Benoni pawn structures, white plays a4. Just typical prophylactic move. But Smyslov says, no, I'll play here, and if you play b5, I will blast you with e5. So after the knight e8 to restrain the e5 break, then he plays a prophylactic. Knight d7. So Roman was talking about this type of position black should play, and saying you got control of the e5 square, yada yada yada. But, as you'll see, against really experienced positional players, this can be slow death. Watch what happens. Bishop back to e2. Queen up. Rook over. Now a little quiet move b3. So the rook over got the rook off the diagonal and protected the knight. The b3 move restrains this pawn from nudging up. Well, knight back. Queen to c2. You would expect queen d2, but in these positions you're not really necessarily rushing to trade dark squared bishops. That would break up your bishop here. Rook over. Bishop back. h6. Now one idea for black sometimes is to play g5. The idea with g5 is to help secure the dark squares. That way white doesn't have a pawn so easy to chase the e5 knight. But the downside to playing g5 is you really weaken the f5 square. And what white can do, white can play something like pawn or bishop to f3, and then go knight to d1 to e3 to f5. Smyslov is not in a rush. King in the corner. That way if there's ever any c4, queen checks, or any bishop checks, he just secures his king on a light square where it's nice and safe. Knight back, and now f4. Now, black has to be concerned about e5 or f5 in these scenarios. But Philippe uses a tactic. He plays f5. Now at first it looks like a pawn sacrifice, but it's actually just a tactic. If pawn takes pawn, bishop takes knight, queen takes, and then rook takes. Now of course, yes, you can play pawn takes pawn, knight here. You've got two pawns, but not really enough for the piece necessarily. A bit unclear. Smyslov's in no rush. He just secures the center. Bishop takes, and pawn takes. So black does win a pawn. And this was actually one of the hallmarks of the Russian school of chess, is they were very willing to sacrifice a pawn to secure the bishop pair. Well, bishop to g4. Now we can see bishop e6 check is serious. So one knight comes up, check. Now, of course, sacking the exchange is not possible. Pawn takes and the two knights are under attack. King up. And now h4. That's an interesting move. But apparently with h4, he wants to go g4, g5, and just blitzkrieg him. Or maybe he wants to play f5 and not allow g5. Rook over. g4. Boom. Notice, he doesn't even give up his bishop for the rook. Pawn to h5. Pawn to g5. Knight to g4. Now, pawn to f5. Full speed ahead. You can see he threatens just to take and power blast in with the rook. Rook over. Check. King takes. And now bishop takes. Pawn takes. And very nice touch. Pawn to h5. So one of the things that I talk to my students about is force. And by force, that's different from material. By force, I'm referring to how many attacking units you have in a sector, or the sector under attack. And you can see black's knight, queen, and rook are all way over here on the king side, whereas white has the queen that can fly in, the two pawns, the rook, the bishop, even this rook can slide over on a moment's notice. So this poor king is just overwhelmed. He takes this one. But now the queen comes flying in. The immediate threat, queen h6, checkmate. He gives up the pawn. He takes it. He tries to hide with the king. Rook over. Now, of course, rook h8 can be met with bishop h2 discovered check. King over. Of course, if he goes this way, he's just coming further into the lion's den. Now he threatens rook to f4 check, rook to g3 mate. He goes over, attacks the queen, check, king up. Yes, if king h3, rook mate, and check. This rook comes here, and now a nice little quiet move. Boom. And what can he do? Queen g4 checkmate is threatened. If he drops the rook back so that on queen g4 he can run this way, well, I imagine if nothing else, he could do it the crude way. Let's see what actually happened. I think he may have dropped the rook back. Nope. He can also do something crude like check, here, check, here, and checkmate. So, a very, very nice example there in these complications here, where when black broke out with f5, he just offered up a pawn sack. He let black win a pawn. He played bishop f3, but winning a pawn required giving up the second bishop and Suddenly bishop to g4. This bishop had a fat hole on e6. The king side was shredded. So great example of pawn sacrifice to gain the bishop pair and attack. And of course, if you go knight back, then you can just probably ram full speed ahead with f5, unleash this bishop, open up for this one. Beautiful example of the Russian school of pawn sacrifice for the bishop pair. Coach, I'm going to let this guy get in a game. I haven't seen him before, so new player. And then Coach Connor, maybe. Okay. Valgan 70. I'm not sure what Valgan is, but okay. But it looks like he's from France. No, Italy. My bad. Yeah, I'm wondering if I should have been more aggressive there, but okay. I mean, I could have played d5 last time. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. I know I'm going a little bit crazy here, but hey, what the heck. Just a little bit crazy. Oh, whoa! Why didn't... Maybe bishop takes knight check. Whoa, that seems a bit extreme there, dude. I was going to take with knight check, but this keeps him from castling. Threatens knight c7 check. Threatens to take on e5. Looks good enough. Get some more pieces developed.
Check. Check. Check.
So Italy, this would make him a countryman of our friend Sandro.
Check. Check incoming challenge. Game.
Okay, good game. Thank you for playing, sir. Something went wrong in the opening there. Oh yeah, I traded on e5 and then pushed the pawn to d6, and yeah, then I had a bit of momentum there. Yeah. How come I got so many whites tonight? Let's see. Whoa. I don't know if I've ever played the Scotch game against Connor. Coach Connor. Coach, I attacked your knight, dude. You gotta play like knight to e7. That was a little frisky. Which is a euphemism for not best. Okay, yeah, now it's kind of falling apart here. Okay, I was trying to do something that I'm clearly not capable of doing.
Check.
So let's stick to what we know how to do, which is take pawns with check.
Check.
And take the rook with check.
Incoming challenge.
Jude is a tough guy. I owe Foxy one because he was here before the presentation, and I promised him. Jude is the dude who, like, there are guys like that out there play H4. Send Harry up the board. So yeah, Jude was a dude who just like barricaded in on me for like a zillion moves, and then was nice enough to give me a draw when I was short on time with an extra piece, but still blocked up position. Well played, sir. Well played. Like one of those super hunker down openings. Hey, can't knock it if it works, right? Can't knock it if it works. Okay, now Mr. Foxy Openings. Foxy Openings have videos by me, Andrew Martin, Roman Jinjin-Hashvili, Susan Polgar. Roman actually talking about Fischer Blitz games that he played, 5-5, 5-3. He was telling me some fascinating stories about this. And all kind of opening videos. They're for sale on ICC. They're at iChess.net. They're all over. Oh, good move. Queen F3. Yeah, I was thinking about that because now, if I play E6, I'm blocking the dark squared bishop, the light squared bishop. If I play knight F6, then there's the old bishop G5. And if I play knight C6, he could pin me and kind of do a dark square strategy on me. So what to do? If I go knight C6 and he goes queen takes and I go knight takes, how is that? Queen takes, takes. You got to do something about the fork. All a bit unclear. Let's give it a whirl. Yeah, he pinned me. So here's his dilemma, sort of. He takes on C6. He gets a nice grip on the C5 square. But my pawn on D5 is pretty well defended as long as I don't lose the C6 pawn, which is pretty hard for him to get to. That's a bit of a... Okay, so now I have the two bishops, but the position's a bit blocked. He's ahead in development. I may feel compelled to play F6 at some point, but how do I ever get my dark squared bishop out? Well, if I go there, he could just ignore me. Okay, let's go here. Maybe I just ignore the C5 square and try to work around it. Now I could go out here. Oh, that gives me a tempo, for better or for worser. Not sure I really had to give up my bishop pair there, but I just felt that after I steal this pawn... Oh! Dummy, why didn't you take the d4 pawn? The d4 pawn, dude. Come on. That was the real apple of our eye. The d4 pawn, baby. Oh well. Yeah, the d4 pawn with tempo even. Fat center pawn. Oh, duh. If you take the d4 pawn, he would have had... there, bishop f6 was interesting. If I'd have taken the d4 pawn, he would have had queen e5. So let's try not to beat ourselves up too bad over not doing something stupid. Oh, but now it's all good. We've got a solid extra pawn. The c5 square relatively... Oh, whoa! Whoa, whoa, whoa! Well, pretty much got to take that. Don't want to give up my super knight. My knight on f5 is a rock. Do not want to give that baby up. Not just yet. No siree. I could have maybe prepped with like queen b8 and then e5, but yeah, that is why I could have done a little prep with queen over and over. Well, as long as he can't get to my knight. I really don't want to send my queen so far away. That bishop move of his is pretty annoying. I don't really want to trade bishops. He'll go knight e4. Let's keep it close to home. And what I really want is to play king up and rook to the h-file. Well, that's annoying. Except
check.
We do have a retort.
One coming for challenge.
Okay, Jude and Nezhmednov. Okay, got to play Jude. I've already played Nezhmed one game.
Game started.
Well, this is a little different, switching gears. But actually, it's a good variation. Roman recommended d5 once. d6 is a move and f6 is a move here.
Check.
I assume on king over he had bishop takes c5. Some tricky business here. Like pawn to e6. Bishop takes bishop check though. Wow. I didn't even think about that one. So maybe my c5 was a bit rushed.
Check.
Great game, sir.
Check. Server announcement.
Well, after all that, which makes me wonder why I played Rook F8 and why I didn't play Bishop F6.
Draw offer. Check. Time warning.
Oh, geez. I didn't know I was so short on time.
Check. 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 Black coming for check on time.
Oh, man! Good game. Yeah, good game, sir. Good game. Oh, painful. Good game. Okay. That's okay, Jude. Good game. Great game. Okay, so Roy MD. Am I next? I don't know. Who is Roy MD? I'm going to play Neshmednov one more because I think I played Coach Connor twice. That was a great game. Now I know the most theoretical continuation is queen h5 check.
Check.
Aha! So now he gets his pawn back, but we got two possible antidotes. One is to play c4 and trap the bishop, and the other is to go into the 7th. Let's threaten to trap the bishop and see what his rescue plan is. I think he probably has to play b5 and jettison the pawn. So somehow, I did manage to get the bishop pair here. Okay, so it's even pawns for the moment, but I have the nice threat of rook a1. I also have the possibility of rook d7. So recouping the pawn may have come at a price. Now this knight is pinned. Very good, Ron. Keen eye for the obvious. So my thought here is to just liquidate to a winning king and pawn endgame. Boom. There you go.
Check.
The double C pawns are useless. White king walks up, picks the pawn. Oh, Nicholas! Hey, how are you?
Check.
The old tricky French en passant rule.
Black forfeits on time.
Okay, good game. Thank everyone for showing up.